Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back. Welcome back to our Family Ministry Thursdays here on TableTalk, where we are reading through the Big Picture Story Bible. Currently, we've made our way through most of it at this point. I think we've only got about 2 weeks left until we switch to something else, but we've had a great time reading through the Bible together. If you're able to join us here live this afternoon, welcome. I'm glad you're here, glad you're able to join in. This is also being recorded as always, and so if you're not able to catch this broadcast live, or if you're able to catch part of it and want to go back, or even if you're able to catch the whole thing but just want to watch it more than once, it'll be up on Facebook and on YouTube after this, ready for you to watch as much as you would like. Just a couple announcements before we get going. We'll take a few minutes just to let everybody who's going to be here come on in. Tomorrow, we will not be having our sort of regular round table on the stage discussion since Pastor Andrew missed Tuesday because we were having internet issues. I'm sure something to do with the crazy windy weather we were having. Andrew will be doing his table talk on Friday instead of what he would have done on Tuesday. So you can expect to see Pastor Andrew tomorrow for table talk. We're going to get started here with the Big Picture Story Bible, a book about God's people in God's place under God's rule. Last week we read about Jesus being born and everything that surrounded the circumstances of his birth. We read about Jesus' baptism with John the Baptist and the voice of the Father coming down from heaven when Jesus was baptized. We also read about Jesus cleansing the temple of all the people who were buying and selling and trading in God's house. And we learned and read about Nicodemus. We learned that Jesus told Nicodemus that he needed to be born again in order to see the kingdom of God, which was very confusing for Nicodemus. This week, we are going to be starting about reading about a blind man gaining his sight. And so I am going to once again get right in close on the book here, and we are going to get started. This is chapter 18. It's called A Blind Man Sees. One day, as Jesus walked along, he saw a man blind from birth, a man who could not see. Jesus' disciples asked him who had disobeyed God, this man or his parents, that he was born blind. Jesus said there was a different reason why this man was born blind. Jesus told them to watch and see the work God had sent him to do. So the disciples watched as Jesus walked over to the blind man and spat upon the ground. He made some mud with the spit and put it on the blind man's eyes. Then Jesus said, "Go, wash in the pool of Siloam," which means sent. And the man went, and the man washed. When the man opened his eyes again, he could see. By this miracle, God showed everyone that Jesus had been sent to do God's work. Now, some of the leaders listened to the man's story, but they did not believe that Jesus had made him see. They said of Jesus, "This man is not from God, The man who had been blind knew better. He told them that Jesus must have come from God. This made the leaders so angry that they threw the man out of the temple. Later, Jesus found the man. Jesus told him that God had sent him into the world to make people see that he could rescue them from sin. The man now saw who Jesus really was, and he believed. On to chapter 19. This one is called A Dead Man is Raised to Life. A man named Lazarus was very sick. His sisters, Mary and Martha, knew that he was dying. They wanted Jesus to come and heal Lazarus, and so they sent for Jesus. Jesus loved his friends, but when he heard Lazarus was sick, he did a surprising thing. He stayed where he was. He did not come right away. Jesus knew God was going to use him to do something amazing. Jesus was going to show God's power over death. So Jesus waited until Lazarus died, and then he went to be with his friends. By the time Jesus got there, Lazarus had been in a tomb for 4 days. Martha met him and said, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." Jesus replied, "Your brother will rise again. I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though he die, yet shall he live." "Do you believe this?" he asked. Martha said yes. She believed that Jesus was God's King and Son, who was sent to bring life to the world. Then Mary came to see Jesus, and Jesus saw her crying. He went with Mary to the tomb, and then Jesus cried too. Some who were there saw Jesus and said, "Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man also have kept this man from dying?" They did not know that Jesus was getting ready to show them that God had sent him to rescue people from sin and death. Jesus told them to open the tomb. Only then did Jesus step forward and pray, "Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I said this that they may believe that you sent me." Then, in a really loud voice, Jesus shouted, "Lazarus, come out!" And do you know what happened? God answered Jesus' prayer. Lazarus came out, and he was alive. A dead man was now alive again. Jesus showed the people that God's Spirit had power to bring new life. Many people believed in Jesus that day. They believed, here's the one who will rescue God's people. Here's the one who has become God's place. Here's the one who even rules over death and can bring God's blessing to all the peoples of the earth. The people were ready to make Jesus their new king. But that made the leaders angry. They were jealous of Jesus. They hated him and did not want him as their king. They decided that the time had come. They would kill him as soon as they could. Brings us to chapter 20, which is called Jesus Wears God's Kingly Crown. Jesus knew his time had come. Soon he would be king. To get ready for the big moment, he went to a place where he could pray. "Father, the hour has come," he said. "Glorify your Son." Jesus worked hard praying. The disciples were tired, and they slept as Jesus prayed. When Jesus finished, he woke them up. He told them that his time had come. And just then, some people who hated Jesus marched up to them. They brought soldiers with them too. These men didn't believe Jesus was God's forever king. They tied up his hands and arrested him. And Jesus' followers all ran away. There they are there. The soldiers and some leaders took Jesus to a place where they hit him in the face. Then they led him off to Pilate, a Roman ruler, and said, "Jesus is trying to take over as king. A criminal like this should die. He should not be king. We would rather be ruled by Rome than by this pretend king." "Crucify him, Pilate," they said. Pilate talked to Jesus. He asked him, "Are you the king?" Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not of this world." Pilate did not think Jesus was trouble. Pilate did not think Jesus was a threat to Roman rule. Pilate may have thought to himself, if I can show the people that I am in control, then they will let him go. So Pilate had Jesus beaten. The soldiers whipped him many times. They laughed at the idea of Jesus as king. They dressed him in a purple robe. They made a crown of thorns and put it on his head. They punched him and made fun of him. "Hail, King of the Jews," they said. Then Pilate tried to let Jesus go, but the people only shouted louder. They wanted to kill Jesus. They warned Pilate that the time had come, so Pilate decided to have Jesus killed. He looked out only for himself. And so, on a small hill outside of the city of Jerusalem, Jesus was nailed to a cross and died. That brings us to part 21. Jesus' followers are in the dark. Darkness fell upon the land. Jesus was dead. He was buried in a tomb. A big stone was rolled in front of the entrance, and the people all went home. For Jesus' followers, that dark day was followed by a long night. The hours passed very slowly. Jesus' friends cried, They had thought he was the king, but now their hearts were filled with sorrow and their minds were filled with fear. What happened? Why did Jesus have to die? Wasn't Jesus God's forever king? Questions kept coming until the next day turned into night. As Jesus' followers tried to sleep, they thought, "We will be sad forever. Will God ever rescue his people from sin? Will we ever have our place with him? Will God ever again bring his blessings on all the peoples of the earth?" We're going to do one more for today, chapter 22, a brand new day. It was the third day after Jesus died on the cross. The sun was not yet up. One woman, Mary Magdalene, couldn't sleep. She had believed in Jesus and had hoped he was the king. She got up very early while it was still dark and went to the tomb where Jesus was buried. As she came close, suddenly she grew anxious and afraid. The big stone that covered the entrance was gone. Jesus' tomb was open and it was empty. She turned and ran, and she did not stop. Seeing two of Jesus' followers, she caught her breath and cried, "They have taken the Lord out of the tomb." Her friends ran off. They raced to the tomb. They looked around, they went inside, but Jesus was not there. As they walked back home, they wondered what had happened. And then, that evening, some of Jesus' followers were meeting together. They were afraid, and so they had locked the doors. Suddenly Jesus came and stood among them. At first his followers were frightened, but then their fear turned into joy. The sadness they had felt was gone. Their hearts were glad again. Jesus was alive. Jesus really was alive. Jesus was risen from the dead. The sun had risen, and it was a brand new day. That leaves us for next week, where we're going to start with chapter 23, which is called God's Promise is Explained. All right. Well, thank you once again for joining us on this Thursday family ministry edition of Table Talk. As I mentioned earlier, you can tune in tomorrow to hear Pastor Andrew's Table Talk that he had originally planned to do on Tuesday. We moved that up to Friday. And then, as always, please do tune in to our Sunday morning service. We'll be running it on Sunday morning, just like we have been. We'll hope to see you virtually there. I hope every one of you has a great rest of your week. Hope you're staying safe and healthy. I'll look forward to seeing you again next week. Bye.